888-287-0655, 888-287-0655 is the number to call to talk to one of our volunteers right now, sitting over there in the studio watching the live stream as they enjoy their day. We're having a great time in here, lots of energy, lots of momentum here as we finish up strong, which is our prayer here on the Spring Spirit Drive.
Yeah, it absolutely is. We get our energy, we get a lot of our energy, at least from you, listeners, from, your calls, your pledges. It gets us excited. It gets the office excited. I believe we still have some matching funds on the table.
Yes, we have $500 of matching funds left.
Excellent. Okay. So call while that's still on the table. 888-287-0655. Yeah, I mean it's crunch day.
It is crunch day. This is your last opportunity to call and talk to us and make an online donation to make it count towards our Spirit Drive.
Yeah, absolutely. So do that. We love to hear from you. We love to hear what you like. What really edifies your spiritual life. So, tell our volunteers that if you like when you call. We're always looking for new donors. We would love to ring the bell that we get to ring when we have a new listener. Whoop, you might have heard it just a little bit on the mic. And we also really like new and old recurring donors, right, Deacon Jeff?
That's right.
Yeah, it provides a predictability of income for the station. So, just like any household or business, Holy Family Radio needs a certain amount of predictability in its income. So consider being a recurring donor. If you're thinking about giving, $120, you could do that $10 a month over the course of the year, and all 120 will be counted in the total.
That's right.
We're always, we haven't talked much about apostles, Deacon Jeff, but we're always looking for apostles as well.
That's right. We're apostles, and it's hard to believe we haven't mentioned this entire time. We're so remiss in this, but we kind of get busy and we kind of, just keep moving on and keep asking and all that. An apostle is someone who has donated $1,000 or more towards, our Spirit Drive. And so we've had a total of 7 apostles so far with this Spirit Drive. We always shoot for 12. There were 12 apostles, but we're not limited to that. All right. So we'll gladly take a 13th, a 14th, a 20th. Doesn't really matter to us, but we'd like to at least get that 12. I think 13 is our record. So yeah. So we're on our way. We're more than halfway through. So if you have the means to help support us in this ministry, it would mean so much if you could dial up right now at 888-287-0655. The underwriter that we're highlighting this hour is Glandorf Lumber. They are also, like our last underwriter that we talked about last hour, is right across the street, just over a little ways. I want to thank them for their support here at Holy Family Radio. All right, we need to move on to our next guest. And our next guest, as we alluded to before when we talked to Gino of the Sierra Club of Lima, is Father Phil Smith. He is the director of the Office for Diocesan Priestly Vocation, so it ties in very well with that. He's also a parish priest, and so I'd like to welcome to the program today Father Phil.
Good morning, Deacon Jeff. Good morning, Kim. It's great to be with you today.
Well, it's great that you could take time out of what I'm sure is almost always a busy day as you prepare, as you run your parish, as you work for the diocese, as you prepare for the weekend. Give us an idea of your role there as the Diocesan Director of Priestly Vocations.
So I'm in now my 6th year as Director of Vocations for the Diocese of Toledo, which means I help Bishop Thomas with 2 different things. One is mentoring our seminarians. So we have 11 seminarians. Many have a connection to the Holy Family Radio listener area, so we'll talk about some of them in a little bit, hopefully. And then the other thing I do is I travel throughout the diocese, meeting with young men who are considering the priesthood, and then praying for asking parishes to pray for an increase of vocation to the priesthood. I live out of my car for that role, driving all over the diocese. And then in addition to that, I'm pastor of Our Lady of Lourdes Parish in Toledo. I've been doing that now about 2 years. And I'm CYO chaplain for the diocese and a few other things. So, I get to wear a lot of different hats, but the vocations ministry is my primary ministry right now.
Is this where you expected to do or expected to be a part of as you were discerning becoming a priest and became one?
Absolutely not. I imagine myself being a parish priest only, and that it's God's adventure. I mean, any vocation is that way. Any married couple will tell you they could have never predicted how exactly things would play out on the day of their wedding. Same for priests. On the day of ordination, you give God your yes, and then he kind of runs with that. My first assignment was at the University of Toledo, Corpus Christi University Parish, which, again, I never would have expected doing campus ministry, but I got assigned there, had a wonderful 5 years doing campus ministry, got to meet a lot of great students from all over the diocese, especially from Putnam County, Allen County, Hancock County. But then now I got transitioned to vocations ministry, which again was a surprise to me, but it's been great. It's been great ministry. Very inspiring to see our young men who are willing to serve God, willing to serve the church. There's so many problems in our world today, and these men have stepped up in the midst of it and said, I want to give my life to serve the church. So it's very inspiring work to meet with young men who are considering giving everything to follow Christ.
Mm-hmm. So I would imagine that involves various events, including Andrew dinners, because we talked about that a little bit with the Sarah Club. So what are Andrew dinners, and how is that important in the process for helping young men discern the priesthood?
3 times a year we have dinners throughout the diocese where priests are able to invite high school students or young adults, usually kind of college-aged men, to learn more about priesthood. Some of the men have never even thought about priesthood before the event, but the idea is their parish priest is inviting them, saying, you know what, there's actually potential that maybe God's calling you to consider this vocation. So we have 3 throughout the year. We had one in the fall in Findlay. We just had one Wednesday evening here in the Toledo area, and then we have one more in Fremont, Ohio in June. So Wednesday night we had a great turnout. We had about 55, 60 high school and college-age men, about a dozen priests. And there's just a lot of great spirit in the room. Again, for men to stop and say, you know what, maybe God is calling me to do this. Maybe I am being called to serve the church. So those events are really kind of fun even for the priests, because you have 12 different priests in the room. You see 12 different personalities, guys of different age groups. We had one of our youngest priests there. We also had guys, who have been priests 40, 50 years. So it's kind of fun to see them play off each other and see the different personalities, sense of humor. So hopefully the young men also see, okay, there's not one personality type for priesthood. Priests are human beings, and they actually genuinely enjoy their ministry.
Mm.
Yeah, that's a great witness, I think, to be able to see, that variety and people enjoying it. Because, a lot of times people's experience with priests might be, the 1, 2, or 3 priests they've known in their own particular parish over the years, and potentially that could be it. So that's wonderful work that you're doing there to provide those opportunities. Give us a call, won't you, listeners, at 888-287-0655. This is the Spring Spirit Drive, the last day of the drive, and we need you to give us a call and pledge your support. Partner with us. Become part of the family of Holy Family Radio. That's 888-287-0655. There are still matching funds on the table for you to take advantage of. We're talking with Father Phil Smith. He's the director of the Office for Diocesan Priestly Vocations, and also a parish priest up there in the Toledo area. How do you manage to balance all of that?
There's a lot of juggling that goes on. I have great staff at my parish that really take care of the day-to-day operations, so I'm really blessed with a great staff here, which helps free me up to travel throughout the diocese like I need to. We're short priests right now. I mean, that's the bottom line. And so that's one of the things I talk about when I visit parishes and encourage young men to think about it. There are people that need priests, and we just don't have enough priests for them right now to serve the people of Northwest Ohio. So there's an urgency to my ministry as well, knowing that, I feel the pinch in my time and not being able to do everything I would like in my parish ministry. And so hopefully young men will see that need and say, you know what, maybe the Lord is calling me. And it'll be easy to put this call off for another couple of years. Maybe now is the time God's asking me to respond.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So what is the process when the young man discerns that maybe he wants to explore that call? How do they make that happen, and what's sort of the process to become a priest?
The first step would be to reach out to your parish priest. They can reach out to me, And we just have conversations. The first time I meet with somebody, I'm not going to give them a seminary application. We're going to get to know each other, talk about what, his sense of priestly call would be, talk about his life experiences, his spiritual habits, things like that. And then through those conversations, if we both get a sense, both myself and the man discerning, that perhaps seminary is the next best step, we may even have a guy visit a seminary to get a sense of what that would look like. And then eventually there's an application process. So the church is discerning. The church is trying to figure out, is this man a good candidate for seminary? And then also the young man's asking that of himself as well. Is this the best next step in my life in terms of my spiritual journey? And so there's this whole application process. And then if a man goes to seminary, that's ultimately where he's figuring out whether he's called to priesthood. The mistake a lot of people make is they try to figure it all out before they go to seminary, not realizing that seminary is a place to figure it out. Seminary is a place to discern your vocation. So a good number of men who go to seminary don't go on to become ordained, and that's fine. That's actually success in our world because we've helped a man figure out what God's call is in his life. So we're not trying to bully anyone into priesthood. We're not trying to push anyone into priesthood because the Lord gently invites. And it takes some time. It takes some time oftentimes away from the noise of the world to hear what God's really trying to say. So that's the purpose of seminary, is to figure out what God's saying. Is this my call or not? And then once he's been in seminary for a couple of years, then usually the focus shifts away from discernment once he has that confidence he is being called and the church has affirmed that. And then he can focus on priestly ministry training, which is, all the classes on how to do sacraments, the classes on public speaking for preaching, all of those things that are part of formation. So the whole process in terms of the actual schooling involved is about 7 years. So it's a lengthy period, and that's purposeful so that a man really knows this is what he wants to do, feels called, and then has the time in seminary to be trained for all the different complex situations a priest faces in his ministry. Priests are pulled in a lot of different directions, and so we want to make sure they're trained well so they can not just survive in their priesthood, but actually thrive serving God's people.
Yeah, I think the idea that a young man is going to go to seminary, we automatically sort of think, hey, he's going to become a priest. Like that's already been decided in many ways, I don't know kind of where that perception comes from, but I also think, though, that it is young men, do you require a college education, like a bachelor's degree, for a young man even to consider entering seminary? Or can they do that within the seminary environment?
So a man can join seminary at a lot of different points in his life. So the earliest point would be after high school. So we actually have a college seminary we use. So that's in Detroit, Sacred Heart Major Seminary. So a man could graduate from high school and then go immediately right into seminary right then. Oftentimes the trend right now is men go to college for at least a year or two or work for a year or two after high school before they enter, but that's not necessarily obligatory at all. I mean, we have guys, who can enter right after high school. Some guys actually go to college and then enter right after that. Some guys go to college, work for a couple of years, then go to seminary. Some guys, don't go to college at all, work for 5 or 6 years, and then decide that they're called to priesthood and enter then. So there really are a lot of different opportunities. Again, there's no kind of one cookie cutter kind of path. God's call works in mysterious ways, and so God calls at various points in people's lives. There's some men on Wednesday night, it was funny hearing the different priests talk about their story. There was one priest who said he knew in second grade he was called to priesthood, and there was another guy who didn't know until he was in his 20s, the first time he thought about priesthood. So God's Spirit works in mysterious ways, and the church's process is able to kind of adjust to that as well.
Okay, yeah, that's good to know, and I think folks need to kind of understand that. Yeah, we think of our education process, as a series of checkpoints, right? We go to A to B to C to D, and we think that like the track to priesthood is just like that. It's just another box that we follow. I don't want to say like assembly line, but they're
linear. Yeah,
it's a linear sort of process where. In reality, like you say, it's varied because sometimes we just discover it at different points in time, and we have different paths around which we go. So I encourage young men and even families to understand and realize what that process really is like, because that might help folks to maybe give that a more serious consideration, otherwise that they may not before.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Give us a call at 888-287-0655 to pledge your support for Holy Family Radio and, become part of the family. We're 100% listener supported, and we need your call and your pledge, whether it be a call to 888-287-0655 or even an online donation through holyfamilyradio.fm or through the Holy Family Radio app, or by texting the word GIVE to 419-969-3255. Now, Father Phil, I have a layman's question, a curiosity question. So when I imagine the types of things that are studied in seminary, all what I'll call the logical things come to mind, the sacraments and how to speak and theology and all of that. But what are some of the other things that we train our priests in? You mentioned a little bit like conflict resolution, like
Public speaking.
Public speaking, right? Yeah. Like, what might be some of the other things that laymen might be surprised to learn is part of the, sort of official curriculum, maybe, or official part of the training process that might be surprising or not expected?
Yeah, there's 4 different areas within seminary formation. One is academic, so I think that's what a lot of people think of. Okay, you got to go study theology, and you take classes about the Bible, and you take classes about the sacraments and church law, and so on. And that's one aspect of it. But then there's 3 other aspects that might be a little surprising to people. One of those is spiritual formation, so learning how to grow in one's own spiritual life, so prayer habits. Each seminarian is assigned a spiritual director, which is kind of like a personal trainer for one's spiritual life. So growing in one's ability to pray, growing in spiritual habits. So that's one area that's all throughout seminary. Another area is human formation, so basic social skills. A lot of young adults today are very shy. Many of them spend a lot more time on their smartphones than they do interacting with other people. So teaching, not just conflict resolution, but how to even start conversations with people, how to be comfortable in big social gatherings, how to be comfortable when someone's ill or sick, and to walk in the room never having met them. So there's a lot of practical training in these areas for tasks that priests will have to do. So I think sometimes men who are discerning make a lot of excuses saying, well, I'm not smart enough, I'm not sociable enough, I'm too shy, I don't like public speaking, and so on. And what they need to realize is those are oftentimes excuses. God may actually be calling them because we do provide a lot of training in those areas. In terms of human formation, just personal discipline, how to keep a schedule, how to keep exercise in your schedule, how to eat healthy, all these things that will help a man deal with the intensity of a priestly lifestyle. And then the 4th pillar of formation is pastoral formation. So how to relate to people as a minister in all kinds of interesting situations. So during seminary and then the summers as well, a man's put in a lot of different situations. So some are going to do hospital ministry. Some are going to work with young adults and youth. Some are going to work in schools. Some are going to work and teach CCD or religious education programs. Some are going to work at pregnancy crisis centers. We have all these different ministries we put guys in so that they learn how to be comfortable in them. The goal is to put guys in situations oftentimes they're not comfortable in, so then they can grow in confidence, knowing, I was scared to go to this homeless shelter and work, but now I'm actually very comfortable there. Or I hate hospitals, I can't stand them personally, but then I had this ministry there, and now I'm very comfortable going into hospitals to bring people communion. So formation challenges guys, but there's all this support network there to help guys kind of overcome their fears and learn how to become priests. And then, of course, there are the practical things you mentioned. Classes on how to celebrate Mass, on preaching. There's one of my favorites when I was in seminary is we had to do fake confessions. So, you would role play. Someone would come in and say, I'm a certain-year-old person, and here's some, basically fake sins. And then you'd have to try to give them counsel, a penance. And then there was a mentor there saying, never say that in the confessional, or, you did a good job there. And it was hard to kind of keep a straight face sometimes as they're making up these sins, that we were trying to deal with. But
I can only imagine.
There's a lot that goes on seminary.
That's great, though. I mean, you got to have that sort of very practical,
Yeah.
boots on the ground kind of training. So yeah,
That's great to hear. I've in some ways I've thought about that. Like, okay, how do they do that for confessions and stuff? That's just fun to kind of hear about.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you've never heard. Sometimes you go to the doctor, and the doctor will bring in, an intern. Do you mind if my intern? I've never once been to confession and heard, I've got a seminarian in training here. Do you mind if he also hears your confession? So yeah, it's just like those little practical things we don't know about as laypersons, and it's interesting, at least to me, and I imagine to others, to hear about that sort of thing. Give us a call, listeners.
And I should
88.
mention-
Oh, please go ahead, Father Phil.
And I should mention, there's also, a social life of the seminary, too. There are recreation times, there's sports teams. Priests have all kinds of different hobbies. So, the men of our seminary, they're normal human beings, too. So there's opportunities then for exercise, to play sports. There's usually a, small seminary band of some kind. There's opportunities for art, music, and theater. And so it's a very human environment. I think some people imagine them just, kind of holed away in a monastery in chapel all day, every day, when there is prayer time, but there's also time for human activity as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So when we talk about fostering vocations, we can obviously pray. We can obviously do things in our parishes and all that. But I think you would probably agree that the key is to do that through families, through holy families. You talk a little bit about what Bishop Thomas's philosophy is on how to foster all these vocations through holy families.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the place, in certain sense, Pope John Paul II talked about a family as the first seminary. That's the first place a man's formed. And what we work with in the seminary, I mean, is actually a lot determined by how well a man's been formed by his own family. Sometimes I think we overcomplicate vocations. The bottom line is vocation's a call from God. So if a man has a relationship with God, is spending time with God in prayer, he should be able to hear his voice. And so, again, if we have families that are holy, that are taking the call to prayer seriously, are making God a priority in their lives, vocations are going to come out of that. If parents are witnessing to sacrifice within their marriage and their family life, again, that's the climate in which a vocation to the priesthood or religious life is nurtured. It's a sacrificial call. It's not just about me, and it's not just about my own immediate gratification. People learn those lessons in family, and oftentimes they're more caught than taught. They're kind of things you just experience, and it just becomes what you marinate in the culture of a family. And then you decide, I want to live my life the same way. It's not necessarily something you learn by getting lectured all the time. It's something you see, and it's contagious when you realize this is the best way to live one's life as a Christian.
Very good. Hey, you're listening to Father Phil Smith here on the Spring Spirit Drive, talking about priestly vocations and how to foster and those and all the things that the diocese does in terms of preparation and formation. Please call us and join our Holy Family here at Holy Family Radio by calling 888-287-0655. It's 888-287-0655. We did have an online donation come in while we were talking here, and we also had a donation come in from Divine Mercy in Paulding, a parishioner over there. So that's kind of on the very edges of our listening area, and we want to thank them for that generous donation. Thank you so much for that. Now is the time though for you to call in at 888-287-0655, 888-287-0655. So Father Phil, in all your travels and going to various parishes and all that, and working with some young men and talking with them, I'm sure that you've come across a couple of amusing stories or two that you might want to share with us, perhaps, or something that might be a little bit more lighthearted, that gets to people to think, this is really what I might expect from young men who really aren't sure what they're getting into.
Yeah, there's a lot of different, I think, fears men face as they're discerning priesthood. And one thing that can be very helpful is a man to have family support. There's young men who've answered the call whose family are not supportive. Now, the other danger is, of course, parents who are overbearing and pushing young men too much to consider priesthood and trying to make them think that's what's going to make their parents the happiest, when in fact it's ultimately God's will that we need to seek after. So, I've had a lot of different discussions about family support. When parents are supportive of vocation, it makes it a lot easier for a young man to respond. I think the other thing to keep in mind is, again, God works through each of us. So knowing that parishioners have encouraged him to think about it, when they've answered the call to know, parishioners are praying for them. Constantly I hear from our seminarians how moved they are, getting notes from parishioners back home that they're supporting them, they're praying for them. You mentioned Pauline Divine Mercy. They do a lot for our seminarians. They've adopted me, actually, as a seminarian back 15 years ago when they did not have a seminarian themselves, so they just adopted me, put my picture up, prayed for me. I had a first Mass there when I was newly ordained. So the support of our parishioners for our seminarians is a good story that I think needs to be told more of. Our seminarians feel very supported by our parishioners, and that helps them persevere through the long days of seminary, which there are some, to know that, yes, people in the parishes of our diocese really do want the sacraments. They really do want to hear the truth being preached in their homilies. They really do want parishes to be led closer to Christ. And so that support from parishioners, that desire for priestly ministry, really goes a long way in helping our seminarians persevere.
That's great. Yeah, it's always good to be reminded of that. You know, we need to be doing that constantly and more, and you can never pray too much.
Nope.
So yeah. Now, Father Phil, you said that you've got that we have 11 seminarians currently. Is that correct?
Correct, yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit about this group of men?
I can, yeah. So if any of our listeners do want to do a little more exploration of who our seminarians are, they can go to ToledoPriesthood.org. That was our Diocesan Vocations website, ToledoPriesthood.org. There's also a lot of great resources there for any man who may be wondering if God's calling him to the priesthood. There's also a way to contact me there, ToledoPriesthood.org. And looking at our poster on that website, I see our feature picture this year was actually from the stained glass windows of Glandorf St. John Parish. It's an image of one of the stained glass windows of the Eucharist. But yeah, we have 11 seminarians, and a lot of them have connection to your listeners' area. So Travis Colley is from Pandora, Ohio. He's spent the past year actually at Finley St. Michael Parish as a pastoral intern there. And so he's getting very close to ordination. He's only about a year away. Member of Bluffton St. Mary's Parish. He'll be ordained a deacon in about a year. Then priesthood comes a year after transitional diaconate ordination. One of his classmates is Eric Kaufman from Glandorf St. John. He's, again, just about a year away from being ordained a transitional deacon, 2 years away from being ordained a priest. And then Jacob Levecki will be ordained a deacon actually just in a few weeks, coming up here in mid-May. And that ordination is open to anyone in the diocese. So that will be Saturday, May 20th, 10 a.m. in Rocher Cathedral. Jacob's from the Toledo area, but he spent this past year doing a parish internship at Landeck, Spencerville, and Delphus. So the three parishes there, Delphus, Landeck, and Spencerville. So he certainly knows that area of the diocese well. And he'll be ordained with Chris Turner. Chris is from the Perrysburg area, but he spent an entire year at Finley St. Michael Parish in Hancock County. All of our men spend an entire year in a parish as part of their formation. That gives them a realistic vision of what priesthood's going to look like, but then they also pick up a lot of practical skills as they kind of shadow the priest for a year. Another one of our seminarians is from the Lima area. Kevin McGraw went to Elida High School, went to Bowling Green State University. So Kevin is currently finishing his internship up in Sandusky. And so, yeah, he's just another year or so away from being ordained a transitional deacon and a couple years away from being ordained a priest. Another one of our seminarians will be down in the Allen County area, Evan Sakarik. He's going to spend his summer at Delphus St. John, Landeck, and Spencerville. So, yeah, there's a lot of connections to the western part of our diocese. That's been historically a very fruitful place for vocations for us. We're very lucky by the men we have. We have a lot of very high-quality candidates right now. We need more, though. We're really short in a certain sense. There's been times when we've had over 20 seminarians, so we're really kind of low right now. So if any young men's considering it, know that there is a need to consider the call and join our group of seminarians who are a good group of guys. One of the things men mention when they go to seminary is they really appreciate that fraternity. They're not alone in living their faith. They're not alone in pursuing this call, but there's another group of guys, again, of all kinds of different personalities and backgrounds, who are seeking to answer God's call and do His will.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's wonderful to know. And a number of those names are familiar to me, and I'm sure to many of our listeners here. Kevin McGraw is especially one because he spent a season doing sports broadcasting for us back in 2012, I believe it was, 2012, 2013, and I think his vocation was born from that. I think because it was shortly after that he decided to kind of pursue that in many ways. So we've checked in with him over the many years here in our Spirit Drive as he's kind of progressed through. We didn't get a chance to connect with him for this Spirit Drive, but hey, maybe next year we'll get with him and chat with him and maybe some others as well as we look forward to them becoming, as we pray for them, becoming a priest here in the Diocese of Toledo. So, Father Phil, is there anything that we've neglected to ask or something that's popped into your mind that you'd like to express to our listeners today before we let you go and get back to the real task at hand?
I would just encourage everyone, you got to continue praying for an increase of vocations. That's the one thing Jesus told us. He said, ask the master of the harvest to send more laborers. And so I think we need to pray and to beg and to make it clear that, yes, we want more priests in our diocese. We need priests. And pray for the young men who are responding. One of the challenges today is there's a lot of cultural factors working against the young men who are discerning. You know, we live in a very materialistic, secular culture. And so for God to be the first place in a man's life is a real challenge. He has to go against the flow. He has to live counterculturally. So I think it's important that we pray for the young men who are responding. Certainly supporting Holy Family Radio and other ministries like this is a great way to help give men and anyone who's discerning a vocation kind of the resources they need to hear God's call, to hear God's word proclaimed, stay close to Him, so that, yeah, they can respond with courage, they can respond with boldness, so that our faith can continue. We have a lot of beautiful buildings, we have a lot of great parish communities, but we need leaders. We need men to step up who are willing to serve for our faith to continue in Northwest Ohio.
Mm-hmm. Wonderfully said, Father Phil. Thank you so much for taking time today to join us on the Spirit Drive today. I'm sure that your work will bear fruit, and that we'll be able to talk with you again soon. And God bless you.
It was great to be with you today. God bless you and all your listeners.
All right. Thank you so much. That was Father Phil Smith, he's the director of the Office for Diocesan Priestly Vocations here in the Diocese of Toledo. Thank him for coming and really sharing with us some interesting insights and things that I did not know about, some of the formation and sort of the process that becomes, because I know in my formation as a deacon, I kind of learned that the church is also discerning you. Mm-hmm. It's not just you discerning into that role as well. So,
and I don't think we can say too much or remind folks too much that the discernment really happens at seminary. Like mm-hmm. you don't have to have it all figured out before you go. Mm-hmm. It's considered just as much of a success if you go and discern that this was not the call, than it is if you discern that it is the call that God is giving you. Mm-hmm. So to not be discouraged by that and to not feel like you have to have it all figured out, I think is such an important message for anyone considering a vocation to the religious life, priesthood, diaconate, that sort of thing.
Right, exactly. So you're listening to the Spring Spirit Drive here on Holy Family Radio. You can become a part of our Holy Family Radio family by becoming a donor. If you're a new listener, if you're someone out there who maybe has listened for a long, long time, have never donated, perhaps maybe now the time has come for you to consider donating to Holy Family Radio. We really do need your support. It takes a lot of money to keep the equipment going and repairs and all sorts of other things to keep it going, because we want to make better programming. We want to do things that reach more people. So give us a call at 888-287-0010. 0655 888 287 0655. That's the number to call us in the studio here. We have volunteers who are waiting to take your phone call, take your pledge. It's a simple process. 888-287-0655. We got another donation from St. Mary's in Leipzig. I want to thank them so much for their donation. We've also had donations today from parishes of St. Nicholas in Miller City, St. John's in Glandorf, Holy Family
Well,
in
great.
New Cleveland. So I want to thank everybody for your donation today. We are going to take a little bit of a shorter break perhaps as we kind of get things moved around here in the studio for our next guest coming in. Our next guest coming in is Wendy M. and a couple of her clients. She's here with Divine Grace Fertility Care to talk about, the Creighton model, natural family planning, NAPRO technology, and all that to assist women with their fertility needs. So, 888-287-0655, 888-287-0655.
Don't forget, you can also donate online at holyfamilyradio.fm. Excuse me, on the Holy Family Radio app, and also by texting the word GIVE to 419-969-3255. We still have matching funds on the table, I believe.
We have about a few $100s left.
Perfect. That would,
That's all we need.
If you're able to give $200, then your $200 suddenly becomes $400 because somebody else is matching that. Give us a call not 419,
Nope.
888-287-0655. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll have Wendy M. and some of her clients from the Divine Grace Fraternity